Hi there, everyone. Welcome to our class on change management. One thing that's constant is change these days. We want to remind you, keep calm. There's only 2 months left to go, and all of us, adjuncts and staff, are all here to help you get over the finish line. Everything is doable. Just stay calm. You'll get to the point where you need to be. So again, here is our wonderful adjunct faculty and staff. Notice that Daryl has a gold circle around him, and we just want to welcome Daryl, who has been hired as PTI's new Director of Education. Daryl has not only been a student of the program, but has been an adjunct the last number of years as a volunteer. He has recently retired from the CTO of the Riverside County. He's spent over 35 years in the public sector. He's taught, he's inspiring, has a wealth of knowledge, and we are so excited to recognize him in his new capacity as we move our program forward. He will be replacing me as the lead for all of our education and certification programs. And as you may know, we're starting a new Midwest CGCO cohort that began on March 19th. It is fully subscribed at capacity, and the next class will not begin until September 25th at the moment. So we are growing, and we will offer a new course every 6 months. So keep that in mind if you know someone who would be interested in the program. Remember, 70 to 70, 80% are from referrals. Upcoming class, our last monthly course is on 17th, and that's a Thursday, and it'll be about AI and data governance. That'll be a lot of fun, a lot of discussion. But more importantly, or as importantly, graduation. May 14th for the West all day, and May 21st all day for the East, where you'll orally presenting your capstones. These are required. None of these, I have to be gone 30 minutes or an hour. You've got to be here for this event. So if you find that there could be challenges to your calendar and you are at the West Coast cohort, think of considering going to the East and vice versa. Look at your calendars and block off that day because we have to ascertain that you are certified by being in this program for a number of hours. So there's no ifs or buts. Anyone missing this will be required to take this one component. You don't have to start all over again until the following opportunity at the next cohort. So it could be 6 months to a year before you actually are certified as a result. So I always need to remind people what they need to graduate because people do forget. You need to complete all your virtual class assignments. And there are two things here. One is looking at your Canvas account, making sure there are no X's and make sure there are no blanks. You may have thought you submitted something, but if there's an X or a blank, that means two things. We do not have a record of you submitting, or an X means that we considered what you submitted incomplete. The other is that you may have been required to do a makeup, a separate sheet, looking at the video recording and being able to write it up in 1 to 2 pages or more. These are things that are required. You need to complete all your Precipio coursework. You need to complete your written capstone, which is due the end of April. You need to sign your code of ethics and not only sign it, but submit it as a homework assignment on Canvas in assignment. So you will see that as well as your oral capstone project during the live class. Now, don't be freaking out about the oral part that's only 4 to 5 minutes. And it's a story about why you chose what you did. Give us a little background as to what led you to do it. What did you find remarkable and or surprising? What did you find troubling? What would you like to have done if you could do it over? Things like that. No need for over preparing and the like. So let's go into these courses. There are five. And sometimes people miss this: leading with emotional intelligence, leading change, human skills to sustain AI transformation, and communication essentials. New is an elective. This means that you need to pick one of the courses among all those offered to you through Precipio Skillport. And at the beginning of the program, I would have said take something of interest, regardless of how long. Now I will suggest do something that's relatively manageable. Take seriously the estimates of time that it might take to complete, because very often some of the times that they offer could be um, lowballed, where it actually might take longer. So keep that in mind. but you need to have all of these taken care of. If you have any doubts after looking through your dashboard with Skillport, by all means, you may contact the staff to learn more and see if they can see something that you can't see, or to just make you feel better like, yes, everything is done correctly. So our next class, our last monthly class, will be April 17th. Again, it's a Thursday. And as we wind down this particular class, we want to keep in mind that we will be seeking new CGCIO adjuncts, not to replace anyone. We love what we have, but to add to it now that we have a new Midwest cohort. So this is something to keep in mind. If you want to give back, it's an unpaid voluntary position. It looks good on a resume. And for those who enjoy staying active, this is a great way to do it. I also want to bring to your attention the PTI's 2025 AI and Cyber Summit, which will occur on April 23rd in Washington, D.C., at the heart of our city. It will be an virtual event, and it will be located at the IBM Innovation Studio in Washington, D.C. We have met there before. It's a great place, very modern, state of the art. Uh, Being in person has its advantages. You'll get to network more easily, get to see certain demonstrations because again, this learning studio they have all sorts of things and people that are going to be at different stations, kind of show you some of the latest and greatest. We also have scheduled a tour with the IBM's new cyber range, which is at a different floor, but we will take you up to this place within the building, and it's very, very interesting, state-of-the-art equipment. They're going to show us the value of having an exercise in a cyber range, especially theirs. So it's quite an event, and some people have said, well, coming to DC this time of year can be pretty pricey. The answer is that's possible and probable, but because we are located by Metro Center for this event, which is served by the blue and red lines, that there are many hotels along those lines, both in Maryland and in Virginia, that might provide you an alternate way of getting in and saving you some money on hotel costs at the same time. So yes, it's virtual, but it won't be the same. You'll miss out on a lot of things that you would not get if you went in person. And to give you another reason to come, we're opening our master class all day class to current students for the first time. Give you a sense of what you can expect. The number one thing our graduates ask for is a way to stay involved. And whether you're a member of PTI or not, you will always be considered an alumni. Now, they're not the same. We want everybody to be a member, but at the same time, being an alumni of this program is also quite important. And so normally you would be getting credit. If you came in person, you'd be getting 7 hours. If you come online, you'd get 5. But for current students, those in this class, no, you don't get current credit or any credit other than getting to see other folks who have gone through the program. And this is also going to be held at the IBM Innovation Studio, but at a different floor. This happens to be their penthouse, which is quite nice. I've been there before. This will be offered both in person and virtually. Both require a separate registration. So let's get to our topic, change management. One thing that's constant in today's world is change. So I always like to start with a few quotes. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Or change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. And people are very open minded about new things as long as they're exactly like the old ones. And with a little bit of humor, change is inevitable except from a vending machine. So, change management, and judging by many of your homework assignments, and I looked at every one of them, some of you have struggled on this one, and that I understand. Not everyone has had a formal indoctrination to change management and might be surprised to learn what a discipline it has become. There are a lot of moving parts having to do with how we measure, how we organize, the strategies, how we motivate, the idea of teamwork, and how do we improve, all of those things. And it's become a separate type of discipline. And there are a number of organizations that have change management professional certifications. In fact, the last time we looked, there were 9 change management certifications. And our guest lecturer today will talk about his favorite, but he recognizes they're somewhat similar. So it's not a bad thing to have as an added credential. When we look at the types of change, we have office move, a reorganization, possibly a merger, ERP, new systems, change in leadership, culture change, retraining, transferring in and out, and external change, perhaps a new mayor, city or county manager, new laws or regulations. And then we have changes occurring in our personal lives, possibly a marriage, a divorce, an illness. But change is everywhere, and we know that, right? So when we look about characteristics of change agent qualities, there is a bunch of aspirational skills that one is looked upon as having. You may not have all of them, but this is again aspirational. One is comfortable with change, is highly empathetic, is an evangelic for their cause. They are experienced, they're goal oriented, good communicators, good listeners. They are influential, they are inspiring, they like to learn, they're organized, they're positive, upbeat, they have a positive outlook. They're powerful and well connected. And given all the heat that one gets in change management, they need to be thick skinned when you think about all the friction created by change. So, with that, I want to introduce our guest lecturer, someone I've worked with over a decade, who makes this one of the most popular courses in our program. Spencer joined Empyrean Dynamics early this year, which is a Microsoft channel partner specializing in CRM and low-code deployments. He also worked previously to that at Quisitive, another Microsoft channel partner, where he led their Microsoft Dynamics CRM team, managing more than 40 consultants. He also led their state and local government sales efforts. Now, prior to Quisitive, he worked at Microsoft as a customer success director, focusing on deploying Microsoft Dynamics platform in state and local government clients. He has taught an e-government online course at Rutgers. Now, I was teaching in person at Rutgers and online. We initially did not even know each other, and we were teaching at the same campus. He also developed an e-government curriculum for the University of Illinois in Chicago. He's been published in multiple government-oriented publications. He completed several podcasts, including Shark Bites, and is a frequent speaker at public sector conferences, webinars, and national conferences. He holds a BS in accounting from the University of Illinois and an MBA in corporate finance and strategic management from the Wharton School of Business. He's also a CPA and a Six Sigma certified green belt. So we have recorded all of this for you. And one of the problems that we encountered was a technical glitch. So I'm going to actually start with some of the opening slides that he used, only like 4 or 5 or 6, and then we will move right into his presentation so you don't miss anything. So with that, let me switch over and we will begin the guest lecture presentation. Spencer Stern. All right, so this is where Spencer began his presentation about organization change management special to this class, where he talks about an introduction, which we kind of did, and what he did kind of builds on that. And he hopes to accomplish and will accomplish in his presentation why CM is so important, some of the key principles, an overview of resistance, change groups, action steps, and even some resistant strategies. So the introduction. First of all, change management, there's a lot to it. It's all about to design an environment that rewards desired behavior and discouraged undesired behavior. The characteristics, it is really a structured process. It's not just winging it. It's clearly defined desired and undesired behaviors, recognizing that, identifying positive and negative consequences for each of these behaviors that are identified, and then modifying incentives to reinforce desired behavior and not reinforce undecided or undesired behavior. So it also is to design a clear view of why undesired behavior persists in a work environment. Again, recognizing, being aware, and having the increased ability to encourage desired behaviors. So Spencer feels very strongly in the ProC's PCT model, although he acknowledges many of the different models have an awful lot of overlap. He talks about project management, and this is really part of that, right? It's really targeting the technical side of change, which is the C is change management, targeting the people side of change. And the I is team leadership, sponsorship, providing governance, strategy, and direction. So you can see in the triangle to the right, you have a leadership sponsorship, which it should not be IT. This should be somebody above, the highest administrative person in an organization. And the other is the change management person in charge and or team. And then you have
Yeah.
project management. All of these pieces
Okay.
relate to the
I guess we should have
proceeds
started that earlier,
PCP
but
model.
so yeah,
Again,
without it,
project management,
people may lose
change
interest,
management,
executive
and team
priorities may
leadership.
shift, people may leave,
So when
you
we
may not get
come
the
to the
resources you need to
question,
be successful. There's a
why
whole host
change
of
management
cascading
and
problems that
why
could
it is so
happen
important,
if you don't
we
implement a
have to
formal organizational
understand that it
change management
increases
plan.
probability of
So
project
let me just
success. And
touch
I can
on
tell
the
you
key
from my own
principles.
experience, I've
We can
seen some
produce the most
ERP
advanced
projects fail
process,
because the one
most
thing they
advanced
cut
information
was
systems,
change
the best
management
strategic
and
plan.
personnel strategies and
But if the
training.
people are not aligned with
And
the
then managing
change, the
employee
culture does not
resistance
encourage
to
learning,
projects, which is
real
always
sustained
there. There's
change
always
cannot
some kind of
occur. And here's
friction. There are
a
people who
little
really
Dilbert
don't like change,
piece. I have a couple of these that
resist
I have
change,
mixed in here
dislike
because I think
power,
that
feeling
even though
helpless
these are
perhaps,
older,
or they might
certainly
actually have
they
a
do
real
a good
reason
job of
why
kind
they
of
don't like the
capturing some of
change
the
as they perceive
challenges
it.
around change
And then
management.
it's also important to build change
Um,
competency
these
into
are
the
some reasons from
organization.
more of a kind
So
of
the goal
psychological
of change
perspective
management is to
why
minimize the time
people
spent in
traditionally
a state of
resist change.
fear
I mean,
and
they hold on to their
resistance
habits
in the
and rituals. They're
project.
comfortable doing something. They've
So
been,
why
especially in the public
is
sector,
change
I've met
management
people that
so
have been doing
important? Well, the
something the
work
same way
culture
for
must
15, 20
foster a number
years.
of
And
things
it's
that are
really
all
tough to get
pretty
them to change,
significant, right?
especially if a new
It
process is
has
being
to
created, a new piece of software is
foster
being deployed.
learning,
It can be
change,
very challenging.
innovation.
And,
The
typically
norm
the
must
initial
be
reaction when you're
continuous improvement.
proposing organizational
And
change
then
management
to
is
manage
resistance. And we'll talk about how to
requires
deal with
concentration on the
that a
future
little bit. But
and
this
its
is
new
why it's so
conditions
hard.
and
This
allow
is why you need a
organizations
formal
and their
program,
people
because if you
to
don't have a formal
respond
program
rather than
and
react
you
to
don't attack it
change.
head on, you're not going to be, oops,
So,
sorry, people.
without
You're not going
change
to be able to
management,
meet
and
the
now
results. You're not be able to get the results that you would anticipate. In addition, sorry about my Teams thing going off, people. I thought I'd had that shut down. Once people see that the change is happening, then very specific improvement can happen. And these are some of the elements around change management that I've seen that are that kind of signal to us that things are moving forward. You get the education and the training; it becomes part of your daily routine. People can envision the outcomes coming forward. That's where these change management champions really come into play here, is the communication that they have to do in order to get people to visualize the change that's happening. This is what your future state is going to look like, and to get them excited about what is happening in the future state. There's a lot of There's a lot of benefits to change management. I'm just going to highlight a few of them here. It's lasting improvement. And this is, I think, so critical, because you invest so much time pursuing a project, pursuing an initiative, that 6 or 12 months after launching it, if it's not being utilized, the project's not considered a success. Change management, by implementing it and focusing on the people, the process, the cultural side of things, that helps drive lasting, meaningful change. The other benefit is the people that are the owners of the process. Those are the folks that typically get involved in helping create, if you will, the new processes, help create the new culture, getting the people closest to where the change is happening, getting them involved in helping create the change and then sustain it. That ensures that it is going to, be sustainable for the long term. This has always been kind of a question that's come up. So recently I put together a slide, because we do have a lot of folks here, obviously, on the IT side of things. And the question was, what can we as an IT person, I'm not a C-level person, I'm a director, I'm a manager, I'm an individual contributor, I'm an analyst, what can I do in my capacity to push forward change? And these are some of the things, become advocates, coaches, be aware, be an advocate, even if you're not like formally a change management champion, just being educated on the different types of being educated on the parameters of the project, and be an advocate, push that information out, support the change management champions or be a change management champion. These are the roles that you guys can play. In addition, because so many of us are on the IT side of things, what can we do from an IT perspective? What existing tools do we have in place, or what tools can we deploy, or what tools can we create to help enhance the collaboration and the communication related to the change initiative? The last one is spend time with the business team and the project manager. Get to know that person. Understand, understand where they need support. If they aren't, if they're having issues connecting with certain departments or certain personnel, be that person on the bench that's willing to step up. Hey, put me in. I'm willing to help here. These are some very specific, tangible, components that the IT team can play to enable change management. As Alan said earlier, everything's kind of about AI, so I wanted to make sure I kind of touched on that. We can potentially leverage AI to have a positive impact on OCM as organizational change management. It can help you predict issues, can help you collect and analyze complex data sets, automates administrative tasks. I mean, I'm sure there's more, obviously, but it's super important nowadays that we need to take into account AI when we're looking at organizational change management initiatives. So let's talk for a second about resistance. I kind of alluded to this earlier. I'll take a quick sip. So why do people resist? So there's, a lot of reasons. It creates anxiety, and it threatens their power, it threatens their status, it threatens their job stability. They just don't like change because they're a natural born resistor, whatever the case may be. And when you do encounter resistance, there's both, direct responses that you can encounter and indirect. And I would say the indirect ones are more challenging to deal with because those are sometimes a little stealthier, if you will, maybe harder to detect as you're going through a project. So I want to just emphasize also that resistance is normal. You will get it. There's never been a project that I've worked on that I've had 100% of the people on board from day one. Okay.
Can we just go with the stance that resistance is futile? You will be assimilated.
I think I actually had that in one of my older decks. I don't know. I'd have to go back and take a look. But yes, that's a great quote. I appreciate you sharing. So these are the benefits of resistance. Okay, it indicates engagement. So if someone is resisting, you hope that they actually took the time to invest, to read the project plan, for example, to do some homework about the piece of software that's being, deployed, to do some research on this new org structure that's coming into play. So it does typically, unless they're just like a natural born resistor and hate apps and hate all types of change, most resistance indicates that they've taken some time to be thoughtful, to formulate, okay, this is why I'm coming, on the other side, on the side of resistance here. It also forces the team to validate their assumptions. And, sometimes when you get a group of folks together, they kind of get groupthink a little bit, and forcing them to maybe change the project plan because somebody else is looking at it from a different perspective. That's okay. That's a good thing. It makes it better. It's also an early indicator of how feasible this project plan is, or this new process, or this new org structure. It kind of a little bit tests the water, Oh, okay, you know what? We got a significant amount of resistance, that we're projecting here with this. We need to maybe retool and go back and look at our project plan here, because I think there's going to be a significant amount of pushback. And lastly, it should indicate inquisitiveness, and that is a good thing anytime you're dealing with change. So some positive things about it: just because someone's resisting, don't write them off and ignore them, engage them. Okay, different types of change groups. There's three, again, this can vary a little, but there's typically three types of change groups. Okay, I got about 10 or 12 minutes. The first one is the groups that are open to change. This traditionally newer staff, or they have, exposure to different ways of doing things. They are typically your biggest supporters. They're typically about 10 to 15% of your impacted population typically fall into group one. A lot of the change management champions will typically come from this group. The group two, uncertain about change, these are people kind of the wait and see approach. Show me the money, if you will. Okay. They want to see the impact. They want to see the benefits. The success of the project typically hinges on getting this group to move from, either maybe staying in group two or move to group one, but certainly not migrate to group three. Typically about 70% of the organization falls into group two immediately. And that's where you're probably going to be, spending a fair amount of time trying to get these people educated, engaged, and trying to push them up to enhance their receptivity to change. The third group is, the resistance to change. Typically, it's 10 to 15% of the personnel typically fall into this group. This can be people who are very inquisitive about it and super concerned, like I talked about in the previous slide. These can be people who are just not at all interested in change, just don't give a crap. They may be planning an exit strategy, for example. People in this group, depending on their level of resistance, they may rather, you may just need to kind of manage that as opposed to necessarily convert them to group two or to group one. You do spend a fair amount of time with these folks because one of the concerns is, and I've seen this happen, is sometimes if people are highly resistant to the change, they start spreading, rumors or start generating or start making things difficult. I've seen it that, hard to believe, but I've seen people try to intentionally sabotage projects because they feel that their, position is at risk here. So those are the types of folks that fall into group three. So not, typically not, could be your smallest group, but you definitely need to pay attention to the folks that are in that group. So let me walk through the phases. So again, we're talking about the ProSci methodology here. 3 basic phases: preparing, managing, and reinforcing. A lot of people forget about the reinforcing phase, to be honest with you. There's so much time spent preparing and managing, and then once the change is completed, like the org structure is completed, the new process is deployed, the ERP software is deployed, you raise the red flag, you raise the white flag and say, success. And yes, take time, celebrate that success. But at the same time, realize that in order to have sustained change, you can't just disband your team at that point in time. You need a change management officer. You need the change management leads that Alan talked about. You need that executive sponsor. And if you take a look in the appendix content, it lays out some different structures where these, how to align these folks. So phase 1, the preparing for the change. I'm not going to spend a lot of time just kind of draining everything, but it's a three-step process here. Define the strategy, prepare, create the team, develop the sponsorship model. You got to have that executive level sponsor. In public sector organizations, who is that sponsor? In some instances, it's been the city manager, the county executive. I've actually had the mayor. I was doing some work at a, I'd say mid-sized city, about 150,000, 170,000 population. The mayor was the executive sponsor. I've had the CFO be an executive sponsor. I've had COOs. It has been rare, very rare, to have like a CTO or a CIO be the overall executive sponsor, because a lot of times the programs are impacting just more than the IT organization. So again, somebody with enterprise-wide view, enterprise-wide perspective, strong relationships throughout the organization, a leader, someone that's going to be listened to, some of that commercial resources. Phase 2. This is the managing the change piece. This is where, you got to create these deliverables. communication plan, training plan, coaching, resistance management. This is where, the change management leads come into play. It's, with the training plan, for example, the communication plan, you got to look at the different sort of communication vehicles that are available. Some people prefer in-person communication, other people prefer digital, some people prefer social. You need to develop a variety of communication vehicles because people want to be talked to in a different manner. And because you're going to have a diverse set of folks that are going to be impacted by the change, you're going to need to use a lot of different vehicles in order to touch them. And then take the actions, implement the plans. The first sort of communication plan you put together probably is not going to be your last one. I've worked on change management projects where we've went through like 3 or 4 iterations of the communication plan before we got it right. You got to be patient. You got to take the feedback. The reason the communications plans change is sometimes because people are moving through the different resistance groups, and we need to take those pieces of feedback into account. The last piece of it is the reinforcing of the change. Collect and analyze the feedback. When you're done, like I said, raise the flag. Hey, we were successful here, but understand what we did differently. In Elgin, when we finished the first CRM implementation, we did this. And we got feedback on what we did really well and what we didn't do so well. So when they moved forward with the next piece of software implementation, we took that into account. We kept getting better at it until we got to the point where there was really no more feedback needed at this point. We still were reinforcing the change, of course, but the program that we put together had been refined so much over multiple projects. It's like, hey, we finally got it right here. So this is, I guess, this is probably my one very technical or maybe theoretical slide here. But as I said, I use the ProSci ADKAR model. That's what I've been trained in. There are other models out there. I just talk about this because this is what I know. But ADKAR is an acronym about awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. These are the components of the change management process. The one element that is most consistently not executed against is the reinforcement piece. As I said, once you finish the project, once you launch the software, once you execute the new process or have the new org structure in place, whatever the case may be, you need to do continuous improvement to, you need to do continuous improvement to make sure that the next time you pursue a change management initiative, you're learning from it. So let me just real quickly talk about resistance strategies. I'll let you take a look at this Dilbert thing real quickly. All right. There's a lot of different resistance strategies, but I would say these are probably the five most common resistance strategies. The rumor mill, I kind of talked about that a little bit. That's where sometimes people sometimes just in the absence of information, they kind of create their own information. That can be very problematic. The only game in town, an example of that is there's an employee who's the only one who knows how to do an activity or create a spreadsheet or create a report. And that's their power base. And they don't want to lose that power base. So they say, well, what I'm doing is so unique and so special that there's no way that it can be replicated. So, how do you deal with that? A lot of training, broad access to data, work with that person to kind of educate them on, the new processes that are available. I'm not going to touch on all of these, but the rules, this is an interesting one. The rules is a type of resistance where there's a widely held belief that a change cannot be made due to an administrative rule or a policy or a union issue or a civil service ruling or some sort of authority. The best approach for dealing with this is to validate the policy and procedure. I was working on a project in California, and I got some resistance from one of the individuals involved. He worked in the code enforcement department. He's like, we can't implement this process, Spencer, because it violates this specific code. And he cited the code, and it sounded so formal and professional. And this was at a time where not their entire code wasn't actually even online. So I went to the library at City Hall and looked for this code section. And what do you know? It doesn't even exist. This was something that he was told by a predecessor, that he can't do certain things because of this code section. And it never even existed. So take the time to understand, why people are resisting, and then come up with approaches to address them. The last piece, I think, before I get to my quotes here, what action steps can we take, to address the resistance that we see? The first one, listen and understand objections. Alan mentioned the word empathy, and I couldn't agree with that. Have strong listening skills, express empathy, first, seek first to understand what the problem is, and then to be understood. And sometimes, resistance is just an employee just needs to talk things out. They just need someone to lend an ear, to listen to them, and to validate them. Focus on the why, not on the how. That means focus on the outcome, what needs to change, and then how do you go about making that change? Remove the barriers. Clearly communicate the business case, communicate the objectives, provide, reassurance. Sometimes people are worried about, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job, or I'm going to get my job's going to be drastically changed. Educate them on the organizational level objectives here. Another one, just in the interest of time, create hope. I mean, you got to be that cheerleader. Boundless enthusiasm, positive energy, faith in the future. Actively work with employees to create this, atmosphere for change. And lastly, demonstrate benefits. Case studies, testimonials, guest speakers, site visits. Talk to, if you're implementing a change in your municipality and you find another municipality that did it, go talk to them. Get them to come in and talk to you. One of the things, that I did when I was working on a project with Elgin, we had a couple elected officials that were very much against the CRM implementation because they felt that it would infringe on their relationship with their constituents from that perspective, that the system would, take that away from them. And what I did is I actually flew out, took one of these executives who went out to San Francisco, had already successfully deployed this system, and had him meet with his peers. And once he met with his peers, elected officials, and they explained to that, this system actually enhanced their relationships with their constituents. He was sold. It was beautiful. So look at creative ways to demonstrate the benefits to people, especially those that are on the fence. So with that, I'm going to close it. I think I'm good on time here. There's a couple quotes here. There is that one from Mr. Kettering. He talked a lot. If you don't know Charles Kettering, Google him, take a look. Really, read some of his stuff. Really worthwhile guy to follow. But the other thing I want to just quickly show you here, after I'm going to blow through this conclusion slide here. This is a good summary slide. Is these? There's my contact information. Oh, I am updating my chapter. Alan can talk about when this new book is coming up. There's a chapter in this book. I'm updating my chapter. I'm very excited. I appreciate the opportunity that Alan and Dale have given me to contribute content to this amazing book. And then just here in the appendix, these are different sort of change management team structures. You'll have my contact information if you want to outreach, but there's, depending on your situation, there's different structures that you guys can utilize. So with that, I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Shark. I think I did pretty good on that.
Hey, you did it. You did a really good job. Thank you. Of course, as I listen to this, I mean, one of the key foundational components is you got to believe, it's one thing to be positive, but in today's environment, if you're in one of these federal agencies, they're dealing with change. And it may not be the change that, you want to support. And now suddenly, I don't think anything you said applies, because now there's no way you can be excited like, Well, this will be better for the country by, cutting 80% of you, and we'll have more space, or we can sell this building, and it'll save the taxpayers money. I mean, that's not something easily sellable. So I think we all know that part of that is to really believe that the reason for our change is beneficial. If you don't believe it, nothing's going to work, right?
Totally
I'd come
agree
back.
with you, sir.
Yeah, yeah,
And I wasn't sure if that was a question to me or to the
yeah,
audience.
yeah, yeah. All right. Before we break into groups, Spencer has agreed to spend a little bit more time with you. General questions.
Question slash observation, Spencer. When you talked about, this one person saying, "Oh, well, according to code, blah blah blah, we can't do this," right? And you go and you research, so this doesn't even exist. Did that throw at least a yellow, if not red flag regarding where's upper management in this? Because how is it that this has been going on and you're the person to call it out? And if upper management is that disengaged in this process, what makes us think that this change process is going to work? Because upper management needs to be actively engaged in supporting it.
Great question, great observation. So the person that brought me in was a city manager who was new. He was there
15 minutes.
less than 12, yeah, less than 12 months. So he didn't even have exposure to this. And then the other thing that was interesting is the department head that this person sat at, he had retired. And there was actually like an interim acting person. And because he had been there for so long and did something so unique, he just really took advantage of it. I'd hate to say it, but he really took advantage of kind of this power vacuum, if you will. And, when I found out about this thing, I mean, I told the project manager, and I mean, he just, he was shocked, because like nobody challenged him, but because it was harder to challenge, everything was not online. Like you literally had to go to the library and look at the book. And it was
exactly.
And people were just like, oh gosh, that's just too much work. I'm not going to do it.
Right, exactly.
And I was the one that did it. And suffice it to say, I mean, this guy just, there was a lot of resentment to me initially.
For sure.
But in his defense, he's like, well, this is what the guy, before me told me, and I never bothered to check it out. I just took his word for it. And, I just had to be very careful because I'm the new consultant there, right?
All right. Yeah.
I need this guy to be on board with this thing. And so when I found out the information, I talked to the project manager first, then we talked to the city manager, who was the executive sponsor, then we talked to the gentleman's direct supervisor. There was a whole process that we had to follow to make sure that this person wasn't embarrassed, right?
Right.
You have to, you're dealing with personalities here, and we had, and that's like a whole nother story unto itself. But it ended up working out okay because we took the time to invest in how to break the message to him. We ended up taking him out to lunch, kind of walking through things. We didn't bring the book and say this. We didn't do any of that stuff, right? We
right.
didn't want to rub salt in it.
Sure. Follow-up question to that approach, just
sure.
Quick. Do you think it would have worked if you had taken it to him and said, I get it. You trusted the person that you reported to. What they told you, it turns out not to be true. Now, I'm going to give you a chance to make it right internally. I haven't told anybody. I'm telling you first, but you do need to bring this to management's attention because this has got to get done.
Yeah.
Do you think that approach would have worked?
I think it's a great idea and it's a good approach. And I think depending on the personality of the person, it could work. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yep. I think in this instance with this gentleman that we were dealing with, because we talked about that, because I talked to the project manager first. That's where I got the cue from, because he's been there the longest. And we talked about that as a possibility, but then we decided, let's just, the project manager he hadn't worked with the city manager because the city manager was new, and he was
everybody's new. Yeah.
Everyone's new. So he's like, let's follow the protocol here, because, honestly, that, if there were some different personalities involved, I think we might have taken that approach and then have him own it. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Own this.
Hey, look what I found.
Right. You got free reign. Create this new process.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Good questions.
I had a question. So you mentioned AI earlier. So do you think most people kind of make the connection that AI is change? And like for example, I know a lot of governments are looking at like AI strategies and maybe even plans and stuff like that. So is like change management kind of like a formal part of developing like an AI kind of
It
strategy?
should be. Yeah, it's a good question. It should be because it is so new and it's so misunderstood. And one of the things that you got to be so careful about with AI is, for example, inputting information that you shouldn't be inputting into some of these large language models. So that's why it's so important to kind of take it into account when you're coming up with your plan. I didn't start talking about AI and change management just until like 1 or 2 years ago, honestly, because it just wasn't as relevant in the workplace. So yeah, it is something that it's the content that can be generated from it is fantastic. The agentic piece can be very good, but most importantly, like the predictive modeling piece of AI is something that I think is very important to take into account because it can help you structure how your team spends their time and how they focus on, what areas within the change management plan they should focus on.
Actually, Alan, you're on mute.
Sorry. Does anybody else have a question for Spencer while we have him? Or any of the faculty would like to ask a question? This is a great opportunity.
So I have a quick question.
Sure.
Knowing that you may receive pushback, do you include that time in like a project plan? Just to expect that you're going to have to do some meetings and extra work to get buy-in?
Yes, good question, John. Yes, you do need to incorporate that. Yeah,
Okay.
there, typically you depending on the complexity of the plan, it could be 1 week, it could be maybe 3 or 4 weeks. But yes, it's something that you should account for. And that's why doing some of the homework up front, like categorizing people in the groups, helps kind of identify how much additional time am I going to need or what sort of buffer am I going to need.
All right, thank you.
Good
And
question.
that raises a question, Spencer, you and I have had in some of these for the last decade. We've talked about there's always somebody who is the ultimate resistor.
Yeah.
The opposite of everything that is good. Everybody knows who that is. They keep popping up in our lives. They look different. Talk about reincarnation. So here they are. So the question that you and I have kind of talked about is you identify the person in advance. We kind of know who that person is probably going to be. Do you come up with strategies to isolate that individual, or do you spend more energy trying to make them your best friend? Because in the end, if you can convert them, they'll be your strongest advocate.
Right. Yeah. So I do. Yeah. I mean, like we talked, you try to do the conversion first. If the conversion doesn't work, then you got to isolate, and that will happen. I mean,
and then after the isolate is the disappear.
Reassignment.
yeah, he's been reassigned to a better place.
Wasn't that actually one of the techniques in your chapter, though, in the book, that
Yeah.
you kind of like make an example sort of out of?
Make an example. Yep. Yeah. Thank you. You suddenly got to force a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had that happen in a project. There was one guy that just would not get on board. We explained the situation to the department head, and he just reassigned him. He's like, you know what, this is the way it is. He actually filed a complaint with the union, and the department head had the rights to do what he did, because this was a new system that was getting implemented. So yeah, it's not your go-to muscle, I would say, with something like this, but you need to kind of, sometimes you got to make a sacrifice on with people if they are going to be, so resistant to getting on board with the program.
How much?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, please. No, follow up. It's cool.
How much does law or statutes or resolutions or ordinances play a role in all of this? Like Is it just situational where you kind of have to like fall back and go like, let's say to the township attorney or what have you to kind of deal with resistors?
So I haven't, the people, so good question. The folks that I've had to deal with is like a union steward, for example, when you talk about changing. With Elgin up front, we knew who the union stewards were and we got them engaged. And actually one of the stewards was actually one of our change management champions. And that worked wonders for us. I mean, that was wow. And she was amazing. The other time, like I've got folks involved in escalations of like the HR manager, HR director. I've never had a situation where like the legal counsel had to get involved with something. We were able to resolve it through HR or through the union shop. But if you are a union environment, getting those, educating on what's going on, also if there is somebody, like I said, a union steward or kind of like a vocal union person who is going to be impacted at the change, reach out to them and say, we'd love to have you on the team. We'd love your perspective here. And especially if they're like an opinion leader and they see that, Johnny is going along with the program, that will typically have a cascading positive influence.
Spencer, you had mentioned earlier on that there's no one way. You have to kind of feel what makes sense given all the personalities in the organization and the maturity. Do you recommend, is it sometimes better to have an outside individual or company serve as a change agent, somebody that you employ in a consultancy, or is it better to have somebody in-house? I can see advantages to both, but the outside person is going to be looked upon as no axe to grind, possibly being somewhat neutral, whereas the other person brings with them their personality.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, that is a good question. So the stuff that I've done typically has been, as a consultant being hired, right? But when like I go back to Elgin, I think it was like the third initiative that they did. I didn't even work with them. Like they were so well trained that they're like, Spencer, we'll need you for an advisor, maybe. And so bringing in, it is helpful to kind of bring in a third party. And again, take a look at those models, at the end of the deck. But there's definitely some benefits of doing that because they typically have more experiences. When I worked with the city of Elgin, we had one person on our core change management team that had done one organizational change management project. And before I started that, I had already done 4 or 5. So there's no, like they wouldn't even be able to get it started without outside help. They would have been tripping all over themselves. So I do think it's important to bring in that outside perspective. It's a question of how much engagement do you want to have that outside consultant have. In some of these cases, some of these projects I worked on, I was the full-on leader, and in other cases, I was an advisor.
Follow-up question to your story about the holdout person, isolating them. Eventually, they disappear. But brief backstory. I've been that person. Mm-hmm. Almost lost my job because I pushed very hard against the system that they were trying to implement because I was convinced it was bad for our organization. Now, flash forward to today. We spent millions of dollars on the thing. 80% of the district hates it, wants to get rid of it, can't stand it, and ask, how did we ever end up here? So my question for you is, have you ever been in a project where there's that one person that's really pushing back hard, but then you start listening to them and you start looking and start putting things there and saying, this person's got some really good points here. This thing might really suck. And these people may need to rethink this. Have you ever been in that situation?
So, somewhat. There was an ERP project that I worked on. There was somebody in the accounting department. They were they had a lot of certifications. They were CPA, I think a CMA.
Yep.
They really knew the accounting stuff well.
Yep.
And the CFO wanted to. I'm trying to remember the details here, but the wanted to structure, I think it was like the cash budget piece and the accounts receivable in a certain manner.
Yep.
And it actually wasn't compliant, I think, with GAAP.
Gotcha.
And this person just got on their high horse about it. And to make the change would have, when we looked at, okay, the change, well, we'll push the project back. We got to do reconfiguration with the software implementation firm.
Yep.
And it was going to cost a lot of time and money is what it was.
Sure.
But this person just kind of stood up. And what I suggested doing was bringing in the outside CPA who signed off on the financial statements for the organization. I said,
Right.
let's get their opinion on this because they're smarter than I am. You know, they're probably smarter than the CFO. And they came in and they looked at the treatment of it, and they ended up agreeing with the analyst. Like, she's
Cool.
right. And
Yeah.
you know, she and kudos to her, because
Yeah.
they would have ended up putting together non-compliant financial statements, which would have had a
Huge
terrible
disaster.
downstream effect.
Yeah.
So, you know, the reason that we paid attention to her is because she did her research. She just wasn't
Right.
screaming and yelling. She really did her homework. And the fact that she had these certifications, she had
Yeah.
credibility. So we paid attention to her.
Cool.
And it ended up costing more money.
But save more money in the long run.
Yes, because
yeah.
what's the price for putting together bad financial statements? Right?
No,
So,
yeah,
so
well,
that,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
Michael, that's a very good follow-up question. And I think the key here is there are two kinds of folks, to overgeneralize. One is somebody who's going to come up with anything they can to thwart change. And they're going to be just obstacles and maybe be even irrational beyond, no one else would agree. And then there are those who are thoughtful, who really do have either some skin in the game or some knowledge. And I think the key takeaway listening to Spencer all these years is the change agent's got to be a really good listener.
Yeah.
Because where I've seen things go wrong is the vendor hasn't talked to the front line. They haven't talked to everybody. And somehow things speed up and projects have a life cycle of their own. And then change management comes in more as a sales team than being part of a thoughtful process. And I think that's something that you get to, Spencer, and that is, when do you start the change process? I mean, to me, ideally, is at the very beginning, as opposed to being brought in at the end. Now, you're just really being a salesman, so to speak, and that's a disservice to everybody. You're just trying to sell up all the good stuff, but that's why I think bringing in an outside person as part of something independent from the vendor
Yeah.
could be really, really helpful and worth that extra expense.
Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, the bringing in the CPA partner for, you probably spent 16-20 hours on it. That was not not an
Yeah.
inexpensive, that was not covered as part of the project budget. So,
Yeah.
like I said, it had long-term dividends.
Cool. All right. Last call for questions for Spencer. Anyone else?
I'll take it if nobody else wants it.
Let's go on, and we want to break into small groups so we can kind of allow other people to kind of weigh in. All right, Spencer, thank you again so much.
This was
Great as
great.
always, and
Thank you.
you always add new things that I find fascinating.
Because you guys ask good questions, Alan.
So Spencer will appear in our third edition of the CIO Leadership book. He will be the lead in our certificate management program for middle managers. And that's a new program with 7 modules. It's kind of like CGCIO Lite. So Spencer will continue to be our change management hero.
Well, thank you. I love it.
All right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you again, everyone.
I figured this, since we're going to be meeting in April on AI, we're going to do a little differently, similar to what we did today, but it'll be our last time to be as a full group. So think of your questions and how you'd like to participate in addition to your homework. But we are going to have a really cool discussion on artificial intelligence, data governance, and how they all fit together. So it's hard to believe that after all these months, we're into a new year. We're almost past the first quarter, and you will be graduating in May. It's kind of exciting. And so with that, I'm going to start off with Daryl because Daryl had that gold circle around him as he's our new director of education. And I wanted to make sure that he got the full recognition that he deserves. Congratulations, Daryl. Um, I look forward to the Midwest cohort with you, at least those first couple of sessions. So, Daryl,
Oh,
your group.
thanks. Thanks, Alan. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you bringing me on. So this is going to be a really cool adventure here. So, all right. So this time, Charlie, you took on taking notes for us. If you could do the report out for the West one.
Yeah, great. Thanks. So overall, there are some mixed experiences with change management. Some folks have years of experience from previous jobs, but some organizations have dedicated roles, and some have never experienced it before. But uh, someone brought up, I forgot who it was. I apologize. Someone brought up that a lot of these things that we do naturally to fill gaps in projects from experience fall under that bucket of change management. So it would be nice to have that dedicated resource. But overall, through a couple ERP implementations, permitting were the experiences that we had, but third parties were used and positive experiences for the OCM side. Sorry, I actually lost my glasses today and I'm trying to read my typing.
You should have given me a heads up, dude. Just, hey, I can't do this. I don't have my glasses.
No, that's okay. I don't like to make excuses like that.
Change management. There you go.
Yeah. So there's a lot of desire to adopt and standardize organizational change management in everyone's organization. I don't think I recall anyone hearing anyone say, no, this is not needed, or we had a really bad experience by implementing a higher level of communication and coordination. The change agents overall, there were some who had experiences with non-designated roles, but they were naturally filling gaps where they felt that that needed to be filled as a natural courtesy and a habit. But some of those behaviors are for good change agents are good perspective, positive mannerisms, and some roles would be department admins. They know the pulse of every department. They can figure out who needs to do what and when, or who has the information. So they're great sources to help be change agents in the organization. The adverse impact of resistors, the theme overall is the people who have experienced this, the cure seems to be dedicating time to sit down and talk with them to learn about the issues that they're experiencing, and which I've experienced too, but someone mentioned they just felt like they needed to get it out. They needed to complain a little bit, and I have recurring one-on-ones with people at very specific intervals so that they can vent. So I know it doesn't boil over after a period of time. And this is an example of that, but it just goes to show that dedicating the time and learning from their perspective as early as possible will help put out those flames to mitigate that carrying forward that pessimism that you don't need.
Cool. Excellent. Good. I'm going to turn to Adam, and I want everyone to know Adam is also the chair of our PTI Leadership Council and sits on the Fusion Learning Partners Board of Directors. And we couldn't do it without Adam either. So, Adam.
Well, thanks. And I'm excited that Daryl's here and we're in still in a forward-moving perspective. But I want to shout out, and I'm going to do this because I have to do it, even though Alan's making these announcements. We would not all be here if it wasn't for one Alan Shark and what he's done and what he continues to do, and the care and the heart that he has for this organization. I just need to say that because I would not be where I am if I didn't have Alan as well. So that's what I'm going to say. And I know Daryl would say the same thing. I know Shelly's going to say the same thing. And I know all of you are going to say the same thing because you're all in the process of graduating. So I just want to say that, and I can't say enough for the friend that I have in Mr. Alan Shark, or Dr. Alan Shark, excuse me. So I'm going to turn this over to Roderick. Give us our one takeaway that we had.
The biggest takeaway was, even though we acknowledge that as a group, it'd be great to have an institutionalized change management plan and structure, widely we don't. And so the group is using varied aspects of change management principles, depending on where they find themselves in, whether it be a project, whether it be an initiative. They're having to draw on institutional knowledge. Some have used tools from technology. I know Jerry was talked about. Some have used some of the techniques as far as one-on-one conversations when they find themselves partway through a project or a situation. So there's varying states. There's acknowledgement there's a need, but how to get there and how to formalize it, I think we're kind of in an arc over, okay, where are we and how do we use the principles in the absence of having a really structured change management plan and system in place in our organizations. That was a big takeaway.
Okay, excellent. And Shelly has been there as a student adjunct. She is so dedicated to this program. It is just unbelievable. We are truly blessed to have such a dedicated, unpaid volunteer group of adjuncts that give their time. And Shelly always has a smile. I don't know how you do it, but you're next.
Thank you. And yeah, I echo Adam's word. Thank you for the compliments. But really, Alan, you've done so much for this program, for the CIOs throughout the nation. It's really something to be an honor to be a part of. And it is, I'm always smiling because I really do enjoy this work and giving back to the program. And just hearing from our peers, being in government space as a CIO, it really is a unique position, and we rely on our peers, and this gives us one method to do that. So that's why I'm always smiling. Patricia was going to give us our one takeaway from our lively discussion.
Yes. So we talk about our kind of like more challenging projects on the change management, and the winners are ERP and the MFA rollout projects that because they include everybody on the organization. And the strong points that I hear from everybody is communication and listening, and also something that is very important, then I agree with that, is if we set the expectations from the beginning, change it's easier. I'm not going to say, maybe easier is not the right word, but let's put it that way. But setting up expectations, and it also helps. Somebody mentioned that the people that it really helps with the change was the supervisors, because they knew the benefits of they will get for changing something on the system or integrating or being able to use the changes that are going to be established or implemented. So I think for the most part, being able to communicate this from all levels and have this constant support and constant communication with people when a change is implemented, that's the most important thing.
Great. Thank you. All right, and Greg is our most recent addition to the bench. We realized we needed somebody to help cover when we had people that couldn't make it for various reasons. And he jumped in so fast that he's been with us every step of the way in this program, both as a great student, someone who I admire, who also comes from a military background. And one of these days we should probably do a podcast, Greg, and talk about that and how it's influenced your role in where you're at. So Greg, it's yours.
Thank you, sir. And I will take this opportunity myself to just extend my sincere thanks to you for what you've done for me personally as a professional. But when you think of the number of years you served as the director and the number of students that come under your program. You've had a huge impact on the public sector, because that knowledge is being imparted every day. And so you should be extremely proud of what you've done that's helped make us all better. And I'm sincerely grateful. This last class is very lucky to have you as their director and chief instructor, and yeah, it's been a wonderful opportunity. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Ross is the individual who was kind enough to take notes today, and we had a very interesting discussion. There's a lot of commonalities that we share with each other, and I'll ask Ross to please go ahead and talk about our top discussion topic.
Yeah, so playing off of some common themes from some of the other discussion groups, communication was a huge thing. If is a key component of a successful change management, and the more that everybody buys in, and that's usually in conjunction with a leadership level that is a strong change agent. We also all talked a lot more about resistance than anything in our discussion, and resistors can slow down a project and completely derail the positive motion of the whole rest of the group. Lack of training and proper management can be resistors in the way of their own. Change agents should be helping others to understand what change management is and trained to be champions on their own, and why the change that they're managing is important, and how their leadership can help make projects successful. Ultimately, the goal is to work together to use the resources responsibly in government to serve the public efficiently.
Cool. I think we all can agree change is now part of our DNA, and that's the one thing we can count on is more change. So we change this program all the time. We change the courses that we ask you to take, and we have to figure out how to get in front of this when we can, be more proactive, be better listeners. I know many of you struggled with the homework assignment. This was the one that I was surprised. A lot of you had very little experience here, and I respect that. My hope is that after listening, Spencer, and we'll, as soon as I get his slide deck, we will post all of this in Canvas, that you'll have a greater appreciation of something you've probably been doing and just never realize it's part of a well thought out discipline. But we got to be better listeners as well, and better listeners makes us better leaders. So with that, have a great rest of the month, and we will see you in April. We'll talk about AI, and this will be our next one. April will be our last monthly meeting before we get to our capstones and graduations. So have a good rest of the month. See you in April.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.